I've been looking forward to this for the whole week. Dr. Brian is an author, an entrepreneur, and one of the leading mind experts in the world. He has been teaching his clinically proven stress relief techniques all around the world and worked with dozens of 500 Fortune companies. Dr. Alman is now helping people to help themselves more than ever before in the fields of weight loss, stress reduction, and healing. Hi, Dr. Brian. How are you?
I'm well, Angelica. Nice to be with you.
Thank you so much for being here. Would you mind telling us a little bit, like briefly, about your background story, how you got to helping people, and where you are, the work that you are doing today? I think your background story is really fascinating because, I think when people hear about it, it's not something that you just study, but you also live through it.
It's true. So I come into the field as the patient, as the client, as the person needing help. I got into the field because of my own back pain. I was born missing part of my back, part of L4 and L5. So I had chronic pain growing up and trying to find answers, trying to find solutions when things weren't working, the typical traditional and even alternative approaches. Nothing was really working. And after many years of reading and visiting doctors and going through all kinds of treatments from medication to
Mm.
meditation to orthopedic surgeons to all kinds of experts, I finally met the teacher that I ended up working with for a number of years. It helped me. And he got into the field because of his own pain, which was
Wow.
our connection. And so I came in as the patient student, then became the collaborator and co therapist. And it evolved from those 4 years of practice and training to what I'm doing now, 14 books later, in the
Wow.
largest study in the world in this area in 120 countries. So it's come a long way. My pain ended up being a bridge for my own healing, but
Yeah.
also my promise to help other people discover their own healing abilities.
Amazing. Yeah. And I think it's really interesting because, you were born like that. So you could almost say, like a lot of people talk about, oh, I know it's in my genes. There's nothing I can do about it. But you were born with a missing part of your back.
Mhm.
Like there is, when you talk about chronic disease, it's something that people can talk about, oh, you can change your lifestyle, but you were born like that, but you still were able, to
Right.
revert, which I think it's really, really fascinating. There's so many people out there feeling so disempowered, on medication. As you know, like when you're in pain, it's like you're in torture all the time.
hmm It is. It's a prison because it's a full-time job. You have to
Yeah.
decide what you can't do, can do, how much time, how you're going to get there, if you'll be comfortable, if it's even worth it. It's very depressing and anxiety producing to be in
Yeah.
chronic pain, whether the root causes are emotional,
Yes.
psychological, genetic. We all have the same trauma, stress, fears, challenges that we have to be able to learn from and grow, which is almost like mission impossible. Most people don't
Yeah.
do it. That's how difficult it is.
Definitely, I totally agree. And when you talk about like the emotional pain, which is kind of the same pain as well, and I think it's really interesting that the work that you did around the adverse childhood experience, and sometimes people are going through a lot of things and they don't even realize why and how or anything, how they got there. And then we're talking about the emotional pain here, right? Like, can you
Yeah,
talk to us a little bit about the ACE and how you
right.
got into that as well?
Okay, so the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, which is the largest, most comprehensive study in the world on physical health, emotional health, mental health, that I collaborated with the co principal investigator, Dr. Vincent Folletti, a medical doctor. He was doing the research and I was doing the treatment solutions. And we ended up collaborating with hundreds, now thousands of people trained, many physicians, many therapists, many group facilitators, nurses assistants. I got into it because I was doing the treatment solution side and helping people that he was studying as to why their traumas were impacting their weight, why they could
Yeah.
lose weight and not keep it off. He was studying how traumas impacted people when there was suicide in the family, or alcoholism, or mental health, or imprisonment, any kind of trauma people went through. There's actually 10 ACE questions. He was sending the people to me that needed the help and weren't getting better. And I was developing the treatment solutions for him, for the patients, for the doctors, for the therapists. So we collaborated actually before the ACE study even began, all through the ACE study. Now we've been collaborating, still do on a weekly basis over 30 years later.
Amazing.
So, but I got into it because I was fascinated with helping people tap into their inner wisdom, their inner doctor, whether it's been a physical, emotional, family trauma. And almost everybody's been impacted by trauma. You know, people have a score of 0 to 10. Most people are 1 to 10. And
Hmm.
so it impacts all of us. And if we weren't traumatized, our parents went through trauma. If, you
Yeah.
know, our parents or we weren't, then our partner went. So we're all impacted by trauma. And most people, like you said, Angelica, they don't really know what to do about it. It's like, okay, I took the ACE, and you can take it at the website, and I know my number, I know my score. It's in 120 countries right now. Millions and millions of people have answered the ACE questions. The
Yeah.
next question is, so what do I do about it?
Mm.
How do I deal with it? What do I do? How do I grow? How do I improve now that I'm aware of it? Happened when I was 3, I was abandoned. It happened when I was 12, my parents got a divorce. It happened through my whole childhood. I was sexually abused, or physically abused, or emotionally abused, or mentally abused. What do I do about it? And that's where I came in, and that's where Dr. Flayton and I have been collaborating all these years, is for parents, for kids, for teens, for adults, for
Hmm.
healthcare professionals, is the treatment solution side. It's like, now that I know when my pain started and I know why I have the pain, whatever it is, help me,
Yeah.
please. And that's where we
Yeah.
come in.
And I think it's really interesting to say that we all have all gone through trauma. I think, you mentioned a few things like, I've been sexually abused, or, I've been abandoned. I think, I am 43 years old. And I think when I think about trauma, it's almost like you feel as a person. And unless you've gone through something as traumatic as either being abandoned or sexually, abused, you don't
Mhm.
you don't allow yourself to have gone through any other trauma, if you know what I mean. So it's kind of like people understanding that trauma can come in any form, right? It
Right,
doesn't necessarily mean on what we think that it was something, like the divorce or the
right,
abandonment or the
right.
sexually abused, and
Yeah.
they stay stuck in that place and in so much emotional, and then which caused the physical pain, which was in my case. I
Mhm.
created this cancer inside me, and
Mhm.
I was so unconscious the whole way that I didn't even realize that I had to deal with a lot of things that had happened in my life. And I think I
Right,
see a lot of people in that place thinking, but I should just be strong, I should just get on
right,
with it. It wasn't that bad, like.
right. Well, we learned in the ACE study from interviewing many, many participants who really turned out to be our best teachers, that
Mm.
everybody's raised with the same handshake agreement in families, which is, nice people don't talk about difficult things. So that agreement requires us to internalize and repress. And when we
Yeah.
internalize and repress our stress, our worries, our fears, our traumas, the immune system and the emotional system are like heads and tails of the same coin. So when we repress things emotionally, we are repressing things in our immune system.
Yeah.
So we actually have real studies, there's hundreds of studies relating our life traumas or life stress or life difficulties with cancer, with heart
Hmm.
disease, with
Hmm.
autoimmune illnesses, real science, hard science showing
Yeah.
that we go through these issues. And the key point, Angelica, is, and we don't resolve them, we don't heal, then they go into the body, and then the body is overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I can't deal with all this. I don't know what to do. And it kind of shuts down and it starts working so well. And then all the chemical experience of whether it's cortisol or whatever the chemical reactions are, because we're all mind, body, emotional. We have all the most powerful pharmacy in the world is in between our ears, which can
Yeah.
be a negative if we're worried and catastrophizing and repressing. And it can be a positive if we're tapping into our inner wisdom and resolving and healing and actually turning our difficulties into life lessons, which is deep inner work. It's not like there's a public path or a simple formula. It's different for everybody. We're all unique. We have to find a personalized approach that is what we've been doing all these decades, so that people can heal and resolve their life experiences, because the body follows the head and the heart. So if the
Yes.
body, if the head and the heart are like, no, 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 you should get over it. It's been decades, it's been years, other people have it
Mm.
worse. It shouldn't bother you. Then the body has to figure out how to not be bothered when it's very bothered. And that's what
Yes.
causes the cancer cells to develop and
Yeah.
cause all kinds of problems in my family and all of our families,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
I really like what you said about, it's not an easy path, a magic pill. It's a personalized path, right?
Mhm.
And I think that is so important to know. I get so frustrated when you see around the weight loss. It's a massive industry these days. People like wanting to get this magic pill, and they don't understand the weight loss is not just about what they're eating and they exercise.
Right,
And they buy those products or vitamins or
right,
supplements or shakes or whatever, and they don't, or they starve themselves or whatever,
right.
and of course they don't get the results that they want, because the inner work, it is not easy.
No, not at all. And you're making a number of great points, Angelica, because everybody is emotionally driven. We are all impacted, whether we're afraid or happy or hopeless or hopeful. We are driven emotionally, mentally, physically, in our minds by what's going on emotionally. And we also all have a part of our thinking in our mind that focuses on what's wrong with us, and we're not perfect, and
Yeah.
we're not doing enough, and we're not doing it right. And if we just did that magic pill, maybe it would happen. So we all
Yeah.
have an inner critic, inner judge. I call it the 15th row view of the movie, of your life movie. And everybody has that. So we have emotions, we're sensitive, we're vulnerable. I'm amazed at how sensitive and vulnerable we all are. And then we have a judgmental, critical, never satisfied, never good enough part of us, which, by the way, those two parts of all of us hardly ever agree on anything. So
Yeah.
we have an internal debate and dialogue and struggle. My heart says this, well, my head says this, and it goes on, usually for a lifetime. And the breakthrough that we really learned in the ACE study and what we've been doing all these years is everybody also has a third part, which is an inner doctor, an inner wise woman, an inner wise man, an inner true authentic self that can really help with all that negative judgmental lifetime
Mm.
membership part of us, and really help us with how sensitive and vulnerable, and we all still have our 3-year-old self and 10-year-old self inside of us like rings in the tree. That inner doctor, inner wise woman, inner wise man, inner self can help us deal with that ridiculous, endless debate, dialogue between what's happening in our emotions, in our mind, in our body. We need ourselves, we need our inner wisdom, but you can only get to it by really accepting and expressing the inner work of what's going on physically and emotionally and
Yeah.
vulnerable, and what's going on in our inner expert perfectionist judge. It requires the whole Angelica, the whole Brian, the whole you. You can't just slice yourself up. Well, I'm just going to think positive and take this pill and everything will be better.
Yes.
Okay, well, that'll work for 10 minutes,
Yes.
or so it's so individual. There's
Yeah.
no two of us. We're
No.
all unique. We all have our own stories. Like my pain, I've never heard anybody have the same kind of pain or deal with their pain or struggle with pain the way I have. And I haven't struggled the way they have. my
Yes, yeah,
emotional traumas and family problems. No one's had the same story, even in the same family. We have our own version, our own experience because we were different ages and different stages when those things happen. So our
yeah,
uniqueness is remarkable, and that has to be taken into account when we're healing. That we really have to approach it as well, what's going to work for you as a unique individual person? And it's really going to take a lot. And it doesn't take a minute or a week or an hour. I mean, it really is days, weeks, months, years, can be decades. If you've been doing something for a million times where you've been judging and criticizing or repressing and internalizing, you're not going to fix it in 10 or 20 or 100 times. You're going to
yes,
have to do
yeah,
it thousands of times because you've been doing this millions of times. So,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
I
but it's in,
totally agree.
and it's enjoyable though because you feel better every time you do it. You're making progress. You don't feel worse before you feel better. You start feeling better right away, and it's progressive though. It's not, the magic experiences, but you do feel better every time. So that's encouraging. That gives you
Yeah.
some inner support, you know.
Exactly. And I
Yeah.
think you said something really important. Like we live in such a chaotic world that, you only have time to listen to the crazy voice inside. You're not doing enough. And what about this? What about that? But it takes us getting ourselves off like this craziness, which
Yeah.
most people don't even know how to do it. Or they might do
Right.
one time and they'd be like, oh, this is just doesn't work for me. Like this is
Right.
just crazy. It's not gonna work. Like I'm over it. And it
Exactly.
takes us to remove ourselves because to connect to that inner doctor, you need
Yeah.
to really stop everything and connect, like you're saying, to your physical body, to emotions,
Right.
have discover some self-love, self-compassion,
Right.
things that, real honor. It's not like the judge voice, but like, yeah, I
It's
have done some
true.
things that were pretty wrong, like I can't keep going on this path. And I
Right.
think a lot of people are not prepared to sit with that because that in itself is painful. It's painful.
Well, it's more painful not to do it than it is to do
It,
it. I can tell you that. That's for sure.
yes.
And one of the points you're making, which is so true, is it's not easy to be loving towards your pain in the rear end self that's always judging and overthinking and worrying and being a perfectionist. It's not easy to love that special part of you. And yet it takes a while and it has to
Yeah.
happen. And it's not easy to be loving and accepting towards the afraid and I'll never make it and I'm not good enough, the emotional, vulnerable 7-year old you. It's not easy because, it's such a victim experience in that. And yet, that loving, caring, inner wisdom approach is essential, whether it takes days, weeks, months, years, or decades. And so, it really is what you're saying, Angelica. It takes that loving, caring approach, but that's a relationship. Whether it's your child, teenage self, or your body or your emotions, you're developing a new relationship
Yeah.
with you that all relationships take time that are great.
Yeah.
Whether it's with your body or your mind or your child or your teen, those relationships take time and energy and communication and effort and patience. And having all of that with yourself and the parts of you that are really difficult, uh, people just can't even imagine doing that. And they have no idea how helpful it will be. And it's so healing, it's so right that everybody kind of at the beginning go, wow, this is a game changer for me. Why didn't I learn this years ago? Why didn't anybody
Yeah.
ever teach me this? Well, now's the time. Yeah,
Exactly. And when you
right,
say like people don't even know how to do it, how they get there, I
right.
mean, talk to us through about like, why would at what point would people reach out to you? Because I think that,
Mhm.
people resist change, right? Like if you
Right.
talk to my old self before
Hmm.
cancer, I would just
Hmm.
be like, I'm sorry, I haven't got time for this.
Right.
Everybody's stressed anyway. I'm just going to
Yeah,
keep going, bulldozing
right.
through my life. But
It's
of course,
true.
I had something that woke me up, the stage
Right.
3 bowel cancer, right? But
Right.
a lot of people don't have that yet. But they,
Right.
as the signs in the body is starting to bubbling up, and they're like, "Nah, I'll be fine." Like
Yeah.
I'm only 30. I was
Yeah.
38 when I was diagnosed with stage,
Mhm.
and I'm only 40, and I'll be fine. Don't worry about that. Like
Exactly.
so. so how, like, at what point do you think people make that decision? Like, I want to go and see Dr. Brian because,
Well, at Kaiser Permanente, where we did the ACE study, the doctors there would call me the doctor of last resort, where people would come to me when nothing else worked. And sort of the inside joke amongst the doctor was, look, they're not dying, they're not getting better. They need to see Dr. Allman. Now that changed over the years because I did so much training there and it was so helpful to the staff that they started to call me the doctor of first resort, where they wanted to see people right away so that they didn't waste years and decades. But you are right, Angelica, that usually there's a wake up call, a
yeah,
relationship breakup, cancer, heart disease,
yeah,
autoimmune diagnosis, where it's like, how could this be happening? I knew I was getting signals, but is it really happening? Is it going
mm,
this direction? So there's usually a wake up call when people get referred by their doctor or nurse because it kind of looks like you're going in that direction. Want you to see Dr. Allman. But typically, it's exactly what you said. There's some experience in our lives that we just can't take it anymore and we have to do
yeah,
something. For me, it was my back. For you, it was the cancer diagnosis. Everybody's
yeah,
going to hit their version of what you and I got
yeah,
as our big sort of epiphany or direction to make our lives heal and better.
yeah,
And that's usually the tipping point. And then they hear about me because they've read one of my 14 books, or their doctor recommended me, or their friend, or their relative, or they
mm,
saw me on TV, or saw me on, Angelica's webinar. It usually takes some experience where they say, oh, okay, this is speaking to me. I
yeah,
think this person could help me. This could work. Let me reach out. And then they reach out, and usually within minutes, they realize, okay, this is going to be tailored to fit me. This is
yeah,
going to work for me. I can tell right away. I'm learning things immediately that I wished I knew before. So you
yeah,
start to, like I said, get better right away. But then, of course, the challenge is staying better and integrating
yes,
it into your daily life and doing the inner healing, because it isn't just more meditation and more mindfulness, because that can be like a band-aid on a broken bone. It's the
yes,
underlying issues, it's the emotional issues, it's the family issues, it's the psychological issues. It's not just thinking positive or just kind of getting a better sleep. Those things help, and I love meditation and mindfulness, and I've written books about both of them. But ultimately, it's the adverse life experiences, it's the emotions, it's the body, it's the mind, it's the deeper issues that have to get resolved. And that's where I come in, is I facilitate people discovering their own best answers. I don't have the answers. I mean, I'm happy when I have answers for
yes,
myself, but I can facilitate people discovering their best answers. And that's what I
yes.
do in the one-on-one sessions and
That's
trainings.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. And why do you think people struggle? You're saying like it's not about, it's just starting and they get a momentum and they feel really good about it,
Mhm.
and they start getting, and then something happens in life, right? Like, I don't know, something, it could be even something small and then tip them off, like the children get sick and then, the whole routine get off, everything gets and then
Right.
they go back to that same
Right.
emotional pattern, right? Like, oh my
Mhm.
God, my life's too bad, da, 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 like,
Yep.
why do you think
Well,
people struggle to change for the long term?
well, there's two answers to that, and it's a profound question. What really started the adverse childhood experiences study was in the weight loss program, when we were able to help people lose a lot of weight, 100 pounds or more, just a lot
Mhm.
of weight, very successful. And
Yeah,
those were the people that were the most likely to gain it all back and more. And
yeah,
we couldn't figure out how they did so well. We helped them so much. Look how smart we are. Look how good we are. And then they
yeah,
gain all the way back. And it's exactly what you said, Angelica. They run into a situation that triggers them. And maybe it's somebody at work that says, hey, looks like you lost a lot of weight. You're looking so good. Why don't we go out on a date? It triggers their sexual abuse and their difficulty with
yeah.
the opposite sex, and they can gain 30 pounds in a month. Or it's a
Wow.
guy guy who loses the weight, and then he goes back to work after losing the 100 pounds, and guys are starting to bully him and push him around. I'm a lot more comfortable being overweight. So whether it's drugs or food or whatever it is, that a lot of times in our addictions and the ways that we're treating ourselves, those are as much a solution as they are a problem. And you wouldn't think of being overweight as a solution, but it does for women keep the riffraff away. And for men, it does keep the bullies away. You can throw your weight around. So you wouldn't think of it, or crystal meth is actually an antidepressant. You wouldn't think of it that way. You think of it as a
Yeah.
bad drug, but it actually is self-medicating. So one of the answers to your question is, a lot of times what people perceive as a problem is as much a solution as it is a problem. And when we get triggered, we go right back to what had worked because we haven't figured out better solutions and we haven't resolved the underlying issues. Now, when
Yeah.
you resolve the underlying issues and you discover there are
Yes.
other solutions besides that one you've been using all those years, chances are you'll be able to have success long term. But your point is
Exactly.
really, the simpler point that you're making is that a lot of times we're so fragile because we have success, whether it's weight or stress or cigarette smoking or drinking or drugs or promiscuity, whatever it is, we have success. And then we just don't deal with and resolve what caused all that in the first place. So it's so easy to slip back to our old coping skills and just slip back to, forget it, why even bother? Because they
Yeah.
didn't resolve it underneath it. They just did the band-aid on the broken bone approach,
Yeah.
and that's really, that just has a real short-term benefit. Yeah.
And I think, when you talk about, crystal meth and eating, I used alcohol like to just numb my emotions, and I
Right.
think alcohol it's used these days as, it's of course it's legal, right? And
Right.
what's the limit and balance? I don't think
Right.
our society knows what balance is. I don't
No.
think our society is capable to understand what, balance even in eating is anymore, right? So but it's accepted, so then people are
It's true.
doing it and doing it over and over again, like you said, without even realizing that that's the only thing they know how to cope with, to being within their own bodies, because they can't even be with themselves anymore.
Exactly. And we're agreeing that it becomes a solution as much as it is a problem, because drinking is the drug to forget. Everybody who drinks and knows this, we drink to forget about our troubles, forget about our worries, forget about our problems, forget about our trauma, forget about that things aren't going the way we want. So drinking is effective. It is a solution. It helps us forget. And I'm not going to
Yeah.
even think about that because you don't. Now, of course, when you stop drinking, it comes back even more, and you have another thing you're trying to forget. And so it multiplies and becomes worse. But nobody drinks to get cirrhosis of the liver, but ultimately that is what happens. Okay. People drink to forget, they drink to kind of get away from it.
Yeah.
So unless we resolve what's really driving us to drink, what's really driving us to want to forget, what is it that we're trying to forget? Because the odd and amazing paradoxical thing is when we work on the underlying issues and the reasons, we start to get better right away. And people start
Yes.
to discover solutions that work much better than drinking. And drinking finds its balance, like you said, it finds its proper place. If people are still going to drink, they find a proper way to do that. But
Yeah.
if you don't deal with the issues, you're never going to find that balance. And society really supports, oh, have another
Yeah.
drink, you'll feel better. Have something more to eat. Try this, you'll feel better. I mean, it's a public health problem.
It
But
is.
ultimately, it's up to us as individuals to really be healthier and happier, which is always within reach. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Reach
mean,
out,
what you
reach
said
in.
is so true.
Yeah.
Yeah, what you're saying true is so true. I remember going to a cancer conference, and somebody who was answering the phone calls from cancer patients uh, told out loud, when somebody call me and they're having a bad day, I just tell them, during chemotherapy, just eat a cake. And I'm like, Well,
Mhm.
that's the last thing that they need to eat
Right. Right.
during chemotherapy, right? Because
Right.
their body is struggling already big time. And you
Right.
are right. This is it,
Yeah.
like it is our society, the way that we cope with it. And it takes, I think, once you get to that grounding place, a lot of effort to say no to that because that's just going to be everywhere as well. And you need
Well,
to be really
yeah.
grounded.
You're true. Well, you're making a very important point that we talked about earlier, Angelica, which is the gentleman's agreement that nice people don't talk about
Yeah.
difficult things. And so the person on the phone could have said, "Well, what's going on? What's happening in your life?
Yeah.
How are you?" And just listened with unconditional acceptance, and the whole desire for the cake would evaporate because the person feels accepted. They don't feel shame for being worried or
Yeah.
concerned or afraid. And so it just evaporates. So that would have been the much healthier thing to do. And if we were training people to do this, that's what we would be training them to do because it's amazing how effective that is. I mean, care implies everything, being supportive makes a big difference, but really allowing people to be accepted and express what's going on and be honest about it really moves us forward. And it doesn't
Hmm.
take long. It doesn't have to take hours. It can just feel, wow, this person's not shaming me. This person
Yeah.
is actually accepting me. I'm getting to tell them my story and they're
Yeah.
just listening. This is amazing. And then, really great things can happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing. And just I know we're kind of almost finishing here with
Mhm.
our time with you. I just want to talk a little bit, just one more question around stress. I think there is so much misconception around stress. A lot of people, walk around with this badge of honor, I'm stressed. I'm stressed all the
Mhm.
time.
Mhm.
My
Mhm.
life's stressful because everybody's stressed, so I need to be stressed. And they
Right.
accept that they is, that's it. That's my state and I just need to be stressed. Now, who's
Right.
gonna go to the doctor and say, I'm stressed and
Right.
tired, like no one is
Right.
going to do that, right?
No.
So what are some of the misconceptions people could have in their minds around the stress now because you work a lot with stress
Right.
reduction and how important that is.
Exactly. We even have an app coming out later this year for the ACEs and stress, and we're in this world for sure. I mean, most people report they are more stressed now than they've ever been in their lives.
Yeah.
Post COVID, all the chaos in the world, all the
Yeah.
financial challenges. I mean, people are reporting they are more stressed than ever before. And 4 out of 5 visits to the medical doctor are stress
Yes.
related. That's a study from the CDC, from Harvard. That
Yeah.
means 80% of visits are stress related. But what happens is we
Yeah.
go to the doctor, we have anxiety, we have stress in our lives, and the doctor really isn't going to ask you about your story or your
No.
ACEs or your life. And they're just looking for the prescription pad to give
Yeah.
you a treatment to treat the manifest symptoms, like firefighters going to blow the
Yeah.
smoke away to put out the fire. And all you're
Yeah.
doing is causing more smoke, and you're never getting to the fire. You're never getting to the story. So,
Yeah.
my suggestion is for people to, admit, I think they are more than ever, that life is stressful and they have stress. Who doesn't?
Hmm.
We all do. And find options, people, journaling, exercise, sessions, trainings to actually be able to be honest and real and express and find ways to cathart and release the stress
Hmm.
to be able to tap into their inner wisdom, to tap into
Yeah.
their inner doctor. So
Yeah.
it's okay. And stress is now normal. And certainly COVID changed everything there for everybody.
Yeah.
And even before that, after that, I mean, there's plenty of reasons to be stressed. So it's okay. It's just important to go with the flow because the last thing you want to do is try to not be stressed when you're stressed because that's going to make you more stressed.
Yeah.
Okay. Try not to be angry when you're angry. You're going to get more angry. Try not to be sad when you're sad. You're going to get more sad. So
Yeah.
forget about trying not to do anything. Forget about the shoulds. Do the opposite. It's really going with the flow and really allowing and accepting and expressing and then discovering what's possible. Again, I'm making something that is dynamic and complex very simple because it's simple to explain and talk about. It's more complicated to actually integrate into your daily life, which is the
Yeah,
goal. How do you integrate
exactly.
this wisdom, these resources, all of this natural ability you have to deal with stress? How do you integrate it into your daily life? That's really the big move. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what you said is so important. Once you acknowledge, I'm going through a really stressed patch at work at the moment, or my business is just crazy. But it's just going, okay, well, I just need to exercise every day. I just need to go for a walk. I just need to do something daily. So you're not just trying not to be stressed, you're acknowledging that you are stressed, but just doing something about it on a day-to-day basis. It doesn't have to be overcomplicated,
And
but
I have
it
to
just
listen. Yeah, I have to listen to the part of me that's stressed, Angelic. I have to
yeah,
actually have a relationship that's compassionate, caring, and friendly with the part of me that is stressed. It's like what you said earlier about the weight and the people gaining the weight back or whatever addiction they've had or any solution they've had. We always ask people, at what age did you first start to drink? Or what age did you first start to gain weight? Why then? Why not five
yeah,
years earlier? Why not 5 years later? And then really connect with that starting point, because that usually is a pretty good story for them to connect with. How they can heal and get better is when it first started. So, when did you first start to feel stressed? Why then?
yeah,
Why not a year earlier? Well, tell me what was happening in your life. So, there's ways to be able to get to the underlying issues while you're exercising or eating better or doing more to help yourself. Remember, you want to deal with the everyday issues and you want to deal with the underlying issues, not either or, but both.
both.
And that's a real good clue to find out when it first started and develop a friendly, caring, and compassionate relationship with that aged you, whether it was 12 or 2 or
Yeah.
22 or 32 or last year, whatever it was. uh, you want to find out when it first started and really start to do some healing work around that as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. And if there is one tool, like a practical thing that people should do every day, in your opinion, what would that be?
I would say number one, after what you got to, which is acceptance that I'm going through a lot, or acceptance that I'm stressed, or acceptance that I have cancer, or accepting that I have heart disease, or once you get to that sort of accepting because you actually have to, because it's true,
Yeah,
then the real takeaway on a daily basis is learning how to let go. Really letting,
yes,
because when you accept and let go, you can get to your inner doctor, inner wisdom. And letting go is a daily experience. I say to people,
yes.
you could never let go too much.
No.
And yeah. So those would be the daily moves that will help a lot. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Brian, for sharing all your, teachings. It's amazing. I'm so happy that you came along and talking to my audience. I'm sure people are going to get a lot out of it. And of course, I'll add the details below so people can reach out and book a session with you as well, or get your books. So all the beautiful stuff that you and powerful stuff that you offer as well. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Angelica. I loved it.